Good morning, and again, welcome. My name is Harry Hollien. I'm sorry not to be here in person, but I'm an old guy. And hey, little did I realize all this would happen over 40 years ago when Jim Gould and I sat on the steps of the Tetracolon in Buenos Aires on a Sunday morning talking about and planning for these symposia. He made it all a reality and fast, as he did the Voice Foundation. I only helped. Great leadership on his part, and especially on the part of Bob Sadaloff, who succeeded him and has turned this effort into a national and international powerhouse. Congratulations to them and to you for making all this happen. And now, let's talk about the forensic sciences and the intelligence services. When looking at these areas, and then your own career, you probably might just think, what? But let me respond by making a couple of observations. Rule number 1. If you are interested, don't hesitate. Go for it. And rule number 2, don't underestimate your ability to do just that. Not possible? Oh, but it is. And as proof, let me tell you about what happened to me. I started out teaching phonetic sciences and trying to find out how the larynx works as an audio oscillator. That was so long ago, things were primitive then, you know, that if you asked a question and tried to figure out how to answer it, you might often wind up having to conjure up a new procedure, a new design. Worse yet, you had to build your own equipment in most cases.
An example. I wanted to know how vocal fold length changed as people phonated in various ways. To do so, I had to build the equipment you see here, then take pictures, and work out ways to make accurate measurements. Then I asked, how thick were the vocal folds under the same conditions? Here I had to adapt X-ray equipment so I could take soft tissue coronal cross-sections of the folds and measure them also accurately. That led to a system where we could X-ray the vocal folds serially throughout the phonatory cycle. We then could make motion pictures of the folds as though you didn't have a front to your throat. I also was curious as to how voice changed from when you were a really young baby to really very old. Looking at the high end of the chart was when I got the idea for my male-female coalescence theory of aging. And I also looked at those special times during life like pubescence, when things changed real fast. Note the change in the vocal folds of that young guy going through adolescent voice change.
Boy, was I having a good time doing all of this. But then I was able to add a whole new layer, a whole new career onto the first career that I had developed. Since I was a naval officer who stayed in the reserve after the war, I went on active duty from time to time. On one of these active duties, I wound up at the Naval Research Laboratory at the New London Subbase. When I went up to pay my respects to the skipper, who did I find but Pappy Bond of Sea-Lab fame? During our conversation, Pappy said to me, well, guys like you are doing pretty well with naval communications, you know, ship to ship, plane to plane, and so forth. But what about divers? And right there, I was hooked.
First, I had to find Navy facilities where I could do underwater what I already could do in the air. Found them. Then how do you hear down there? To do so, had to transport an audiology lab down under. Not only that, but had to figure out what parts of it wouldn't reflect sound. Hence, I use my DICORS, Diver Communication Research System, and Bekishe audiometry to find out how you heard underwater. And what did we find out? We found out that you hear underwater by bone conduction. You don't use your outer or middle ears at all. Then I asked, how do you talk underwater without just saying blub and drowning? Found places to use DICORS for that too. Went on later to mix gas, heliox, needed Navy hyperbaric chambers and C-Lab for that work. We even went to sea to train divers to use acoustics to navigate. The best part of all this was that I was able to use all the things I had learned in my first career to do these in my second overlaid career. And you can do the same. One last example. You can adapt what you know to either study or work with animals. I did it with tigers, who are solitary. How do they communicate over distance? And with dolphins. How do they make all those noises? With their nose, which is on the top of their head. Today we are addressing the third layer I added, and one that you may too. It is called forensic communication, and is made up of forensic phonetics, or voice, forensic linguistics, and forensic psychoacoustics. No time to go into the nature of these three parts. Lots of people have written about them. For example, if you are interested in short reviews, you can see my chapters in Dr. Sadilov's books, in the Encyclopedia of Forensic Sciences, or in Cyril Weck's The Forensic Sciences. Well, still not convinced? Hear this. There is hard scientific evidence that your auditory system, coupled to your cortex, is far more powerful than you realize. For example, Krauss, her associates and colleagues, have shown again and again that the human auditory mechanism is far more sophisticated than most of us would expect. Better yet, they have shown that with training in music, speech, voice, language, and so on, greatly enhances a person's prowess in that area. It's there. You already have special skills. Incidentally, our group has published a lot of research that says the same thing, even about speaker identification. So rule number 3, you already possess many of the skills you need. You also possess many of the necessary techniques, systems, and procedures. Just consider the way you solve the problems of patients, clients, and students, whether you are trying to mitigate a disorder or enhance talent. It requires both the skills and strategy you already are using. The ones in forensics usually parallel them. So do the computer programs, recording systems, and analysis programs most of you use daily. Of course, you will have to familiarize yourself with the world of criminal justice, the courts, and intelligence. But even here, you know more about them than you might think. Primarily if you watch some of the hundreds of shows that regularly are seen on television. Of course, a little serious study will help, too, but you know that already.